All right, assalamu alaikum and very good evening. Good morning, good afternoon, as many participants are joining from different parts of the world. First of all, thank you very much for joining me on the discussion on what and how the literature review should be written. All right, not last week, about 4 days before, we had a session on what and how to write chapter 1. And today we'll be going through what and how chapter 2, that is literature review, should be written. All right. And then soon I'll have chapter 3, chapter 4, and 5 as the time allows me to have the sessions. Okay. Let me share the screen and start the presentation. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that the screen is same as what I have. It's not changing. Okay. Meaning I have to go this way. If I go there. All right. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me start the discussion on chapter 2. Chapter 2 is one of course, every chapter is important, but again, chapter 2 has a special significance. As I always said, chapter 2 basically beautifies your draft. Okay. And chapter 2 happens to be the longest chapter in most of the cases when you write a dissertation or a thesis. Okay. And chapter 2 is a chapter which is closely scrutinized in order to make sure that you have chosen the right variables in the right way. You have selected the right kind of underpinning theories, and you have also identified the literature gap. That's what is expected at the end of the chapter 2. Okay. So when we attend final viva positions as examiner or as supervisor or even the internal examiner or external examiner, that's the chapter in many times we'll be closely scrutinizing to make sure that it tallies with what the research problem being identified and defined in chapter 1, and also the variables that you choose being rightly extracted and then develop the theoretical framework in chapter 3. Okay, so let me continue. This is what we are going to do, literature review. Okay, normally a literature review chapter will have the following outlines. We will start with an introduction, then we'll have global literature, regional literature except your country, then we come to specific country literature. Okay, so meaning that we'll start the literature review from a global perspective, then we will zoom it into regional perspective, and then we'll zoom in into the specific country where you are going to collect your data. Okay, that's where it's what is very important in chapter 2. You have to somehow justify why you have selected that country, specific country, to conduct your research or to collect data for your research. Okay, many examiners will be drilling you why. If you say, for example, you are from Nigeria, then someone can always ask you why Nigeria. So that's where you need to have a specific literature, and you have to have justification why you would like to select that specific country. You are from that country, that argument is not enough. Or collecting data is easier for me, that argument is not enough. You have to have some specific justification, all right? Because every country is different culturally, politically, socially, and many other things that are different. From that, we have to pick up certain thing that is very special to justify why you have selected in that country to conduct your research. Okay. Then we'll be looking at theories that underpin your research. Then finally, you may end up with a gap in literature review, identifying exactly what you have found, that what has been done and what has not been done, the gap in the literature review. Okay, so from there you will develop your theoretical framework. Now, there are two kind of thinkings are there. There's one group of scholar or supervisors, they would like you to have theoretical framework and just the hypothesis in chapter 2, at the end of chapter 2. The argument is, once you completed the literature review, you are now in a position to identify the gaps, and now you are in the position to extract the important variable that is relevant to your premise of research, and then you develop framework and you write or construct the hypothesis. This is one group of scholars believe in that. The other group, on the other hand, they believe no, the theoretical framework should be given in chapter 3. In that case, chapter 3 name would be different. It's going to be theoretical framework and research methodology. It's not only research methodology. Okay, so it is up to you. You have to talk to your supervisor and see which one he prefers. If your supervisor prefers theoretical framework and the hypothesis to be included in chapter 2, please do so. Or if your supervisor wants you to put it in chapter 3, is fine. Only difference is, in that case, chapter 3, if you put theoretical framework, the name of the chapter would be theoretical framework and research methodology. I have seen argument in the final viva session with examiners. Okay, you may have an examiner who prefers your theoretical framework to be in chapter 2, or you may have an examiner wants theoretical framework to be chapter 3. It is not a big deal at all. You can just agree with it and you can just replace, refine and readjust. It's not a problem at all. Okay, and then the gap in the literature review is not the ending of your chapter. You will still have a summary, because in the summary you will highlight what have been done and what has not been done, and that gives you the room to do a new research. Okay, now what is a literature review? Literature review, is basically we consult what people have done. So basically we review what have been done. So that's why if you look at the meaning of literature in terms of research, it will say that works that we consult in order to understand and investigate our research problem. Meaning, once we have a research problem in mind, then we try to find out some research papers to understand with how previous researchers explored into doing research in that area. So looking at what kind of theory being used, what kind of methodology being used, what kind of findings they have, what kind of difficulties they faced. So that's what the reason we look at the previous literature to review it. Okay, so we obtain literature and then we review them critically, and then we extract exactly what we need to support our research. Okay, why we need a literature review? Because literature review basically is serving the book, scholarly articles and other sources that is there. It provides basically a description, summary, and critical evaluation of key studies, in relation to the research problem being investigated in our own research. So when we do literature review, we will be able to provide a description, a summary, a critical evaluation of previous research that is somehow related to the research problem that you have identified. Okay, so the purpose of literature review is to gain understanding of the existing research and debates relevant to particular topic or area of research. Okay, so we are trying to understand what has been done and what are the debates there, because every research will have some shortcomings and limitations, and from there we take up to the new research to do a further work on the work had been done before. All right, now in literature review, we should be able to identify issues, the differences and similarities of the works have been undertaken, and we integrate the key points of research and make relationship with our topic. All right, so we are reviewing the literature available from the past, and then we introduce the scope and describe the scope that is there for you to undertake a new research. All right, and in any research we do, I put it in a blog letters, journals, right? We basically prefer you to review the research papers, research articles, or review articles based on research, okay? So we do not really want you to cite from the book. The book is somebody's opinion. It may not be based on research, all right? So the magazine reports and writes ups, even in the newspaper, it may not be based on research. We may take some data to support our case, but in the literature review, definitely we will not depend on book, magazine, or other sources like newspaper and many digital media that we have. We may not accept it, right? So we will more focus on the journals. And even when we talk about journals, we'll prefer to have more established journals, all right? So when we obtain a journal paper, we got to also find out, investigate and find out what kind of journal it is. Make sure you are not citing a predatory journals which do not really review. We submit the paper, we pay the money, and they publish the paper. So you should not be citing any paper from a predatory journal because it has not gone through the peer review process, and therefore the quality of the research, the quality of the paper may not be acceptable to many examiners and supervisors, okay? So when you are doing literature review, we should be able to organize to cover the identified and defined problem. Remember, we already identified the research problem and we define it. Now, when we are doing a literature review, we have to make sure that that research problem become nucleus. So everything we do is revolving around the research problems. Even the literature review, the literature that we obtain, it has to be, revolving around the main theme of the research problem, which will never, which will become a dependent variable later on. Okay, so must take all the evidence about the problem with the author's experience, and then that's what it said. Previous research, when you obtain, you have to review it critically and extract the information that's relevant to your work. All right, and as much as possible, get the latest published materials. And we are saying that you should be avoiding old published materials, but please do not misunderstand here. Latest published materials, we mean the key studies. What we expect in Malaysia, the standard is you need to have 40% journals that you have cited or you put in the reference list should be from latest 5 years. Latest 5 years, okay, latest 5 years. 60% could be older than 5 years, all right? Now, so when you are reviewing a key study, please make sure you obtain the original paper. Say, for example, in your research, you are selecting a theory to be underpinning theory. That theory was first proposed in 1970. So that original paper should be cited. And after that, you have to, later I will explain more. You have to give citation of the following work. So the theory was proposed in 1970, that is being cited. And after the 1980s, 1990s, and now 2020s, right? So we have to start with the 70. Definitely, if you are selecting that theory as underpinning theory, or if we believe that theory somehow helps you to create, the background of your research, to create the storyline of your research, then it has to be cited. The first original paper should be cited. Okay. So when we say latest published materials, we don't mean that 100% papers has to be latest, all right, latest 5 years. So 40% latest 5 years should be all right. Okay. It must be related to your topic, and if not, do not get it. All right. And on the last part of the section, definitely you must have a statement on how these old published materials helps the researcher in current study and relate to your study, right? That's what it said, that you have latest 5 years publications, and then when you have old one, definitely you have to connect it, and you have to have justification why you are citing such old material that you have obtained. Okay. Now, these are some key useful tips that I would like to give you to help you to write up chapter 3. Identify appropriate academic or professional field. That would be the weakness of many students. When you identify a research problem from the society, from the industry, but you have to make sure it is somehow connected to academic or professional field, right? Because your PhD degree is academic degree, so your topic has to be somehow academic in nature. Why? because you need supporting data, evidence through literature review. So if you choose an area where you have less number of literature or paper available, then you'll be suffering a lot later on. Okay. So when you identify this is problem, make sure that it is something academic, something professional. Okay. Evaluate and critique literature, challenge the assumptions. This is where most of the students are very weak. All right. What usually we do is we just summarize. We just summarize, take things from people, and we just summarize and we present it in a sequential manner. Okay. So what we do, we cite somebody what has been extracted. That like David 2010 have conducted research on this area and found out this, and followed by William 2014, and then it continues. It's just like you are citing, taking from people, putting it, and just putting a summary. That is not literature review. You have to critique, you have to evaluate their research, and you have to critique the literature available, and you have to challenge certain debates and assumptions you have, meaning that you have to have your own words, your own assumptions, your own inferences on every research paper you cite. Okay, so what you can do, for example, you can cite 4 or 5 similar findings paper, one after another. And after that, you have to have your own inferences there. All right. So you can say, based on the 4 cited papers as above, it is understood that, and go on. So you have to have your own inferences. And even you can connect it with the premise of research. That is where you are collecting the data. It could be your own country. Okay. Number 3, be highly selective and include only those aspects of literature, research literature, all right, and non-research or conceptual literature that are relevant to developing the foundation of the current study. So you are selecting the research literature which are directly connecting with you, and also you may take some non-research like from the book, from magazines, from newspapers. Some report may help you to develop the storyline, right? Foundation of the current study. And when you do literature review, any literature that you take in or select, make sure it serves a specific study-oriented purpose, meaning you are connecting with your research problem being identified and defined earlier. Each major and key previous study is discussed in a separate paragraph with the findings. This is very important. In every area of research, there are certain papers, certain researches are known as key study. Say, for example, if you are doing a study on service quality, definitely you have to refer to the guy who has done the first study, Parasuraman, right? He proposed the sub-quality 10 dimension, then later he revised it and make it 5 dimensions. So you have to cite him. And then you have to elaborate his study and findings in one specific paragraph. Similarly, say for example, after him, somebody has done another study and extended his model. That key study has to be also narrated in one paragraph. So the key study or the major findings with this study has to be discussed, evaluated and discussed in a critical manner in one paragraph. Okay. And those study has supported the study afterwards. You can, describe them one after another, okay, without being, just one specific chapter. So only specific paragraphs is allocated for the key studies or major findings that supports your study, okay. And then later you have to summarize collectively, same as with non-research and conceptual literature by authorities who hold similar views. All right. So even though you are citing number of articles, say on a specific one, say for example, literature review, it starts with dependent variable. And we start with the definition of the dependent variable that you have identified. Say for example, we take a research, factors affecting job satisfaction in the manufacturing industry in Malaysia. Then job satisfaction is your dependent variable. That is the research problem. So you start the definition of job satisfaction followed by factors affecting job satisfaction, the theories that explain job satisfaction one after another, right? So at the end, you have to have a summarized version whereby you talk about the key findings from all research, where you find a lot of similarities and some differences which got to be highlighted. Okay. And then a review of literature should read as a synthesis, right? Written by someone who has read all the literature, so is able to look across it all and select the highlights and synthesis in a totally integrated section. Okay. So when you write literature review section, that's what we'll always tell you. Make sure you have a good flow and logical sequence. So you are putting logical sequence, and then flowing from one to another. All right. So because at the end of literature review, you would like to show us what have been done and what had not been done. Okay. So that's where you are synthesizing. You are collectively summarizing. All right. So that later you can always refer back while you have your findings. So when you are going to write the discussion chapter, you will refer back to your chapter 2. Okay, this what is going to help you a lot. All right. So now this is where most of the students have difficulties or problems. Where to start? Where to start? Give me a few second break. Just few second break. All right. So this is where most of the student will struggle. So I'm not sure where to start. Okay. So remember, the main research problem, the nucleus of research, is your dependent variable. The main research problem become dependent variable, and all the issues connected to the dependent variable, all the issues that contribute to the problem become independent variable. All right, and in between, you may have moderating, mediating, and control variables. So you have to start with dependent variable. All right, dependent variable. I have problem with many students. Sometimes, some students, I ask them, for example, what is your study about? For example, student has done a research on human resource management and organization performance. Human resource management practices and organization performance. I asked the student, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing a study on human resource management practices. I said, are you sure? He said, yes, my study is about human resource management practices. I said, what is your dependent variable? The student says, organization performance. I said, then what is your research problem? He said, organization performance. Then what is your study about? He says, it's about human resource management practices. I said, okay. So that's why when the student wrote the chapter 2, he started with human resource management practices, definition of human resource management, dimension human resource management, all about human resource management. At the end only, he started talking about organization performance. That is wrong. Okay. So your dependent variable is basically the research problem, the main problem that you selected, okay, identified, defined, and selected to undertake research on it. So all the issues connecting to it, all the issues contributing to the main problem become independent variable. So you have to start with dependent variable, okay? And then your independent variables, when you are writing independent variables, how should you write? Say, for example, I give an example. If dependent variable is organization performance, that's where you start your literature review. And you are identifying here under the theories explain dependent variable, the definition of dependent variable, issues connected dependent variable, the theory that explain dependent variable, all that. But after that, when you start describing literature review or reviewing literature on independent variable, you have to do it one by one, right? So say, for example, first variable is selection. So the title would be the relationship between selection and organization performance. Now we are connecting independent and dependent. So your literature review cannot be just specific on independent variable. Dependent is on dependent variable. But when it comes to independent, because those are the issues connecting to the problem, So the literature review here, you are making connection. You are talking about selection and then connecting to organizational performance, followed by training and connecting to organizational performance. That's the way the literature review has to flow on. Okay, so we start with dependent variable, followed by each independent variable you have separate subsection, and that you may have many paragraphs there, and then followed by another dependent independent variable connecting with dependent variable, and then followed by it goes on. Then you have to have, if you are moderating, and you describe the relationship between moderating and dependent variable and why you have chosen moderating. If you are mediating variable after independent, you will go to mediating, and then you talk about mediating is relationship with dependent and why you have chosen it as mediating variable. Okay, and some of you, especially those of you who are doing research in economics, accounting, finance, you may have certain control variable, and that's where many students will do a mistake. There will be no literature review of the control variables. Okay, so if you have control variables in the framework, and if you think that control variables are connected to your research problem, then definitely you have to have separate literature review on the control variables. You must have it. Okay, and then at the end you will have two choices. Okay, you can have a separate section on research gap. That's where you can describe the research gap that you have identified through the literature review to justify the selection of independent moderating, mediating, and control variables. All right, and then followed by a summary, or you can have a summary section at the end by highlighting the research gap. You can do that. You can have two sections, or you can have just one section. Okay, now if you are going with dependent variable followed by independent and moderating, mediating, still you can follow this one also. You may have to, in a way, when you are describing literature, you have to go with the history of research. Then you talk about the key studies. Earlier I said, right, the key studies that are major findings that impact your research, it got to be highlighted. And then you have to have evaluation. So you are going chronologically, right? You have brief history of the literature research has been done in that area. Then you identify the key studies, highlight them, and then you evaluate them and tell the reader why it is so important for you to undertake a research. Okay, what has been done and what remains to be done. Okay, and how do we intend to use the experience of these studies in your research? All right, and that's where we always suggest research students that your mind got to be always inquisitive. All right, you got to be critical. You read people research, find out the pitfalls, shortcomings of those research, and those one, if you successfully identify them, then definitely that become the premise for you to conduct a research. All right, again, the next few slides will give you more clear pictures. Now, there are many different approaches in organizing the body of literature review. All right, and also depending on the length of literature review, you can combine several strategies. Okay, the first one, of course, the most popular one and the most used one is the thematic one. The one earlier I mentioned. I talk about starting with dependent variable, that is a theme. Then the next followed by the first independent variable and dependent variable, that is also thematic. Third, going with second independent variable and dependent, that is also thematic, right? So you can present your literature review in a thematic way. And the next one is chronological, as I said earlier. In my earlier slide, remember, here we have shown you are talking history of research, reviewing key studies. This is definitely chronologically going. Okay, so when you are going for thematic, so you are again looking at the history of research, review of studies. You are going to do that, and that when you go with thematic presentation, again it has to be presented in a chronological order. That's what I said earlier. If a theory has been proposed in 1970, that breakthrough paper, okay, that paper, groundbreaking paper, got to be cited first, and from that you proceed it chronologically under the theme. Okay, So while you are presenting a literature review, the suggested way is to combine the two, thematic and chronological. You go with thematic approach combined with chronological. Okay, so meaning that you are going with dependent variable and present the literature in a chronological order. You are going for second independent variable and you are presenting with the theme of independent variable. Again, you are going with chronologically. Okay, so history of research, reviewing the key studies, all will be done in that way. So that most of you would be using this or doing this, use with thematic and present it in a chronological order. Okay, now there are some research whereby methodology is being highlighted. Your contribution is more on methodology. In that case, you have to start with thematic and then you combine with methodological. All right, but again, the chronological will be there, right? So you start with thematic, chronological, and methodological will be highlighted. Okay, or you may also look at certain theory, certain literature review, certain thesis. You highlight could be on the theory. Okay, so the literature, as we said, option the foundation of a theoretical framework. All right, so we can discuss various theories and all that model, and finally we reach into a summary of literature review. I think about 2 months before, I was an internal examiner for a thesis of an economics student. I see the student started with the theory, okay? So it's theoretical. And after that, literature review. And finally, she came out with the modeling, economics modeling and all that. So there are areas where theoretical could be the focus, okay, main focus, rather than going with the theme, okay? So these are the four approach, okay? So we started with thematic, chronological, methodological, and theoretical. The most suggestible way would be go with thematical and chronological, combining these two. But in case in your research, you are focusing too much on methodology, your contribution is on methodology or your contribution on theory, in that case, you go with theoretical and then chronological, methodological and chronological. So it depends on kind of research that you undertake, okay, depending on the problem that you have identified. Now, every literature review chapter, this is what is very important. Every study would be underpinned by a theory. In any research topic, any research area that you talk about, there are many theories, there are many theories that underpin your research. There are many theories that explain the phenomena. There are many theories that explain the problem that you have identified, okay? So we have to have a separate section discussing the theories, and from the theories, 4 or 5 theories, you highlight 1 or 2 that you have taken them as an underpinning theory, okay? So underpinning theory is the theory that underpins your theoretical framework. Underpinning theory is the theory that support your independent variables that you have selected. That's what we call underpinning theory. If one theory does not support all independent variables that you have decided to put it in the framework, you may have 2 theories, or even you may have 3 theories. It depends on the kind of research problem you identified, okay? So underpinning theory, this chapter or this section and the literature review chapter should provide some kind of synopsis of theories derived from researchers' experience, from readers, from the reading of previous research. And finally, you have to provide a justification. Remember, in your research problem that you have identified, you may have, say, for example, 5, 6 theories being selected, and you somehow you find they are connected with your research problem. So you may not be taking all the theories, right? Finally, you will select 1 or 2 theories. So when you take or select 1 or 2 theories from many theories, definitely some kind of justification should be there. You have to justify why have you selected that kind of thesis, okay, that kind of theories, okay. Now, at a conclusion, all right, so when you conclude your literature review chapter, there should be an excellent summary of the whole literature. Many a time when we read the summary of literature review chapters, we find a student put only one small paragraph, all right, and will tell the student that you did not do a justice on you, because you have reviewed so many papers, so many theories being reviewed, and then a summary is just one paragraph or 2 paragraph, okay. But again, it cannot be too long. If you write too long on the summary chapter section in the literature review, then you might be repeating the same thing that we have covered in chapter 2, on the whole thesis, whole chapter 2. Okay, so summary has to be concise, precise, extracted one, selected, highlighting has to be given. Probably in a summary, you have to highlight the factors being identified, and from there, what are the factors you think or you have decided to take in your framework, and that follows on to chapter 3 when you develop your theoretical framework. Okay, so here you'll be justifying why certain kind of variables you think are suitable and to be taken in your research framework. Okay, now when you talk about gap, I have a video in my YouTube channel talking about the gap, right? So some students have difficulty on it, so I have put 5 questions here. If you can answer, if you have the answers of these 5 questions, then you may conclude that you have a research gap already, right? The first question is started, what is your topic? Number 2, what are the key people in the field and what are the resources available? What are the key ideas been talked about in previous research? What kind of methodology has been used? What are the strengths and weaknesses of existing research, and what contribution you are going to make, and how different your research is going to be? All right. So if you have these kind of questions were there, and you can find answers of these questions, then definitely I would say you have already identified a research gap, and that has to be highlighted at the end, towards the end of your literature review chapters. Okay, so I have given some example here. For example, prior studies suffered significant methodological limitations in applicability or relevance of findings in the developing economies or emerging economies, because most of the study being undertaken in the developed countries. Inconsistency in the findings of prior studies, that could be some of the examples that could be highlighted in your summary of literature sections. All right, and I'm giving some example here again for you. For example, literature review chapter, you are saying that contemporary studies give conflicting or including not inclusive, inconclusive results. Okay, so therefore there is a valid reason for you to conduct a study. Then you may say the most of the extent studies focus on profitability, say for example finance, and ignoring the non-financial performance. So you may definitely take it as an example that there is a gap there and you would like to fill up that gap. So some example like that. Okay, so when it comes to a mediating or moderating variable, so you have to highlight again what has been done and what is so significant for you to take into that variable as moderating or mediating variable. All right, so that summarizes the chapter 2. Okay, so to wrap up my discussion on this chapter 2 today, basically literature review, I said that we consult with previous researches to identify what have been done, what have not been done, what are the theories being used, what the methodology being employed, what have been found out. From there we try to find out what could be some of the gaps that you can highlight in your research work. All right, and again, when you present your literature review, make sure you have a very good flow and logical sequence in presenting the literature. And I say there are different approaches in presenting the literature review, and the most advisable one or suggested one would be you start with thematic one combined with chronological. All right, so you go with dependent variable and you present the discussion in chronologically, or you go followed by independent variable, there's another sub theme, followed by the second independent variable, there is another sub theme. So you go by thematic way, but make sure you go chronologically. In that way, you'll be describing the history of research. You will be describing the review of the key studies, and you'll be presenting in a very logical, in a very logical manner, logical sequence, the evaluation of the key studies, and you should be able to infer your own comments and inferences of the based on the previous studies being conducted. All right. So with that, I would like to end my presentation for today, and I'll open it up for question and answers. I have few participants with me join online, so let me bring them to the stream and get their question first, and then I will move into the chat box where I see quite a lot of questions are there. So I will answer all the questions. Don't worry. All right, I'll be answering all the questions. So those of you who are with me now, who would like to ask the first question? Those of you, in this stage, please. Yes. Who has the question first? So it's Arobani. Okay, brother Arobani. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this wonderful lecture. My question is during citation, for instance, if you get an information from a newspaper, how valid is the information? That is one.
Okay.
Then how can it be cited? Then secondly, assuming it's a news information, maybe a comment, a statement made maybe on a TV or a radio, and you know that that statement is very important to your work. How do you cite, some of the information in your research? Thank you, Prof.
All right. First of all, as I said during my presentation, newspaper, magazine, all those are not really considered research literature. They are literature for us. So what we can do is when we find in certain cases that research literature available are not enough to support your case, you need some extra additional evidence and data. In that case, if you obtain from newspaper, magazines, you can definitely quote them, okay, quote them. How to cite them? How do you put in the reference? Once I finish chapter 1 to 5, I will have a specific session on APA style of referencing. So you have to wait until then. Okay, that question I do not want to answer now. So how to
Thank you.
cite newspaper, TV statement, or magazines? You are going to have a specific session on it for you to answer. So is the answer clear to you? Did I answer your question, Brother Arubani?
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Thank you.
So you will depend more on the research findings rather than newspaper report and all that. Those would be additional, You have to have backup evidence and data. In that case, we get it from newspaper. All right, Brother Femi ala Ditan, right?
Thank you, Prof.
Welcome.
Yes, sir. My first question is, please educate us on the difference between conceptual review and empirical review.
Okay. So you are looking at differences between empirical review and
conceptual review.
Conceptual review. All right. In a PhD work, if you are doing a PhD, definitely it has to be empirical review, all right, in most cases. But if you are doing a qualitative study, in that case, we have conceptual review. If you're having a theoretical framework supported by previous literature and theory, it has to be empirical review, okay? Because based on the empirical work done before. But if you are doing a qualitative research you start with zero, right? You start with zero. And you end up with some assumptions and theories really based on concept. And that's why your literature review is conceptual. Okay? But if you are doing a research using deductive approach, using existing theory and literature, then it has to be empirical literature review. Following me?
Yes, sir.
So in a qualitative research, you have conceptual framework. Therefore, your literature review has to be conceptual. Okay? But if you have a theoretical framework, deductive approach, and you are having you are having a deductive approach and quantitative study, definitely your approach is starting with theory and findings of previous research. So it has to be empirical review. Is that clear now, brother?
It's clear, Prof. My second question, sir.
Yes.
While carrying out the literature review, is it expected that for instance, we have an author who has carried out a research. Do we need to mention the topic, the research methodology, like the instrument used, the sample size, the results, and even the conclusion and recommendation of the study? Do we need to include that in our own literature review, or we should just mention the findings of that previous study?
In the literature review section, we focus on theories and the findings that the research have done. Okay, so you are looking at which the theories they have used, and we highlight more on the findings they have. But now, if you want to criticize, evaluate a research, then definitely you have to look at the methodology being used. Am I right? You have to look at the sample being used. You have to look at data collection methods employed. That's all you got to look at. But you are not going to put that in the literature review all, right? So you have to be selective. That's what I say. Certain research, you may need to go with thematic and chronological. In some cases, you have to add on the methodological. In some cases, you have to add on the theoretical. There are 4 approaches I talk about, right? So if you want to have a very good literature review, in fact, you may have all 4 together. You are going with thematic and going with chronological. Again, you will have connection with methodological and connection with theoretical. That gives you even richer literature review that you. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Prof.
Welcome.
Finally, Prof.
Yes.
My final question for now is the issue of moderating or mediating variable. For instance, if you want to carry out a research and we are interested in investigating the difference in the performance of public and private secondary school, for instance. So under our review, we need to review performance in public school, performance in private schools. Is it together or we review them separately? And in that case, the private and public secondary school, do we refer to them as moderating or mediating variables?
All right. So you are going to look at basically the performance of schools. That is your thesis. All right. So you're looking at the performance of schools. Okay. Then
Public and private.
your sample. You have some private and some public. That is your sample. Okay. But if you say a comparative study between these two, then literature will have to be presented. It can be presented together or it can be a separate presentation, depending on the problem that you are highlighting. Okay. If you are looking at school performance, then your literature review has to be combined, public and private together. But you are saying comparative study between these two, then in that case, possibly you may have separate literature findings based on previous work be presented separately. Okay. But again, different supervisors will have different opinion. I do not want to give you any conclusion on it. My last session, I said, academic, we have our own different approaches and understanding. If I say this is right and this is wrong, I'm going to put myself in trouble, all right? I'm going to put myself in the hot water. I don't want to say it has to be done that way or it is done. I can give you different way of doing it. And then you have to consult with the supervisors and select the one you would like to adopt, okay? Both are okay, depending on the kind of problem you have. But in terms of moderating, if you feel the origin of the school or the category of school, either it's government or public, and if you want to put a moderating, then you have to have definitely a bit discussion on that. Because for moderating variable, you have to read Barron and Kenny, the paper that gives you certain conditions that have to be fulfilled for selection of a moderating or mediating variable. That you choose a mediating or moderating variable fulfill those criteria, then only you can propose them as moderating or mediating variable. In that case, you have to have a literature there. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Prof.
So, Prof.
Yes, Charles. Yes.
Yes. First of all, thank you for your nice presentation. In fact, a lot of questions that I had, you have answered them. But then something is still confusing me. You have told us that we can present literature review by following themes and chronologically. But then in the beginning, you said about considering presenting our literature review starting at global level, regional, and country. Now, suppose I'm presenting my literature review based on themes that I have chronologically. I have probably more than 10 themes. You mean that in every theme, I have to discuss the theme based on global, regional, and...
I got your point.
Yes.
Basically, Nida, okay, you have gone out. You have to just mute your microphone. Okay. It's a very good question. I think many participants, those are with me now, have confusion over it because there are 3 different ways you talked about. We say it has to be globally, regionally, and your country context. Then later I said it has to start with dependent, and later I said it has to thematic, chronological, and all that. It has to be thematic and chronological. You go with the theme. Theme is dependent variable, and then independent dependent, and then you describe it chronological, and then you have to also follow, especially for dependent variable. Dependent variable, that is your main problem. That is a theme of your research. So when you're presenting literature on a dependent variable, make sure you go with international, global, then zoom it down to regional, then go back to zoom it to your context where you are conducting the research. Okay? So you are going with thematic still. You are going chronological thematic, but then first you start with global findings, then regional findings, then zoom it to your own context. Is that clear, Charles?
Yes, yes, Prof.
All right.
But then another question, Prof.
Yes.
Is there any difference between giving a case study at the end, probably of your literature review, and empirical studies? Is it possible to present them together? That you have case study at the same time you have empirical study. Are they different or they are just the same?
Basically, when you're doing a research, some research we do as a take sample of many companies. Certain cases you take case study approach. So your research is done based on a company, that is your sample. Still, when you look at literature, it's literature based on research findings. So it doesn't matter whether it is based on a case study or it's based on an empirical research taking a few companies in the sample. Both the findings that you have are based on research. So it's not a problem. Both can be accepted. Okay.
Okay. The last question.
Yes.
For those who are doing qualitative studies, is it necessary to incorporate the underpinning theories?
Definitely not, because the reason you do qualitative study because you have failed to identify theories that underpin your research, and that's why you have gone for qualitative. If you have enough theories to explain the study, then you wouldn't go for qualitative. Rather, you go for quantitative. The reason you go for qualitative study because the phenomena, the research problem that we have identified cannot be explained with existing theories that we have. And that's the reason if you go for qualitative, and that's why we have conceptual framework. We don't have theoretical framework. So the question of underpinning theory is not there. Okay.
But we are developing theory in qualitative.
You are
right?
developing theory, yes. At the end of your research, you will come out with a theory. If you cannot come out with a theory, at least you'll come out with some assumptions, some hypotheses.
Okay.
And then those do quantitative research, will start from where you have ended. The qualitative people, when they do study, where they ended, the quantitative will start from there. And then when you finish quantitative research, we will raise some questions at the end. So those questions we raise cannot be explained by the existing formula, the theories. Then again, a new qualitative study will be undertaken based on the concern, the queries that we raise, which are not answered by theories. Following me, Charles?
Yes, Prof. Thank you. What I've seen is that we are actually trying to report what others have done. The issue that you have said that we have to critically discuss and make differences and similarities and come out with our own point of view. That's where the difficult comes.
Yes.
Discussing the point and then coming out with your own idea that this is what I think from the literature review. That's
Yes.
a difficult area, yes.
That's where most of the students are very weak. Most of the students, what he will do is he will just present it thematically and chronologically, one after another. It's just a summary of previous work. So you're not putting your argument and what do you think of those research. You got to be critical. Every research has some limitations. When you finish your PhD study, at the final chapter, towards the end, you will have limitation of research and suggestion for future research, right? None of the research is complete, and so you'll have some shortcomings and all that, and you will highlight that. So that one have to be kept in mind. So all researchers suffers from problems, and you have to identify, you have to highlight, and that's why you are doing a new research. If a research done, all research is done are very reliable and everything is fine and correct, then why should you be doing a research then? So when you criticize,
Prof?
that gives you the room to do a new research, right, Charles?
Yes. Is it possible, Prof, to consult you probably to help me on the flow of just a flow, not the whole chapter, I mean, the flow of my
As I mentioned,
chapter 2.
as I mentioned in my last session, actually many students
Yes.
contact me every day. I am connected with 1,100 students from all over the world. I got 4 webinar groups, WhatsApp group, and if you count all of them, it's about 1,100 of them. And then I have another Telegram group. I have about 900. So this is the number of students that I deal with. Not everyone will ask question, but there are students will personally send chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and I'm a one man. It's difficult for me. And also certain supervisors may not like it also. My comments may differ from your supervisor. So what I encourage is,
Yes, sure.
once you are ready with chapter 1, 2, 3, then you can send me. I don't mind going through and give you some feedback. But don't send me chapter 1, then again
Okay,
chapter
thank
2, then chapter 3. That will be a problem for me. Once you finish chapter 1 to
Okay,
3,
Prof.
that is like a very good conceptual log already done. Then you can share with me. I will quickly go through and give you some suggestions
Okay,
to
Prof. Thank
improve.
you.
Right?
Thank you, Prof.
All right.
Thank you.
Nida, who is there, Nida? Because you didn't switch on the camera. You can unmute your microphone, yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salamatullah.
Yes, Prof. I joined you very late, so I have little idea only what you're talking about. I guess you are guiding us about literature writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about how to write the literature review chapter in a PhD,
Okay.
DBA, or master research. Yes.
Okay. So, Prof, I want to know that uh, when we start writing the literature review, we all highlight the previous studies. In chapter 2, it is okay to write the hypothesis.
All right. I got your question. That's what I said, that among us, among academicians, we have two different school of thought. In one group of academicians, they believe after literature review chapter 2, you proceed with theoretical framework followed by hypothesis. Then only you go to chapter 3 and you have research methodology. This is one group. The other group, however, they believe no. Literature review, just leave it as literature review. Finish it with literature gap and a summary of literature review. And in chapter 3, you start with theoretical framework, then constructing the hypothesis, followed by research methodology. Either one is okay with me. All right. There's nothing different, right? It's a question of whether to put in chapter 2 or whether to put in chapter 3. It doesn't matter at all. So it's up to you. Depending on your supervisor. If your supervisor believes it should be in chapter 2, put it in chapter 2. If your supervisor believes in chapter 3, put it in chapter 3. It's not a big deal at all.
Okay. Thank you, Prof.
Welcome. Brother Shahrul, any question from you?
Assalamu alaikum, Prof.
So,
Thank you for your nice presentations. And today I have learned a lot, and I believe that total participants will be more benefited because most of the research students are struggling in the literature chapters. Most of the questions are already coming, but just I have one questions. How to synthesize the research theories. For example, I have a research model and I will use the 3 theories. So how to synthesize the 3 theories?
all right, basically in the literature review, when you go even thematic way, so when you talk about the dependent variable, that's where you will touch on your theories, right? Or maybe later you may have another section just on highlighting the underpinning theories. That's why I say, for example, in your area of research, you have identified 5 theories. Those are relevant. 5 theories, say for example. But the independent variable that you have chosen are not from all 5 theories, only from 1 or 2 theories. So the independent variable which is supported by a theory, that theory become your underpinning theory, right? the theory that explain your variables, those become your underpinning theory. So when you talk about theories, towards the end, say for example, 5 related theories are there. You describe all 5. But then after that only you have to relate it with your research problem and your research context. If your research problem is some kind of phenomena that is being supported by not all 5, 1 or 2 theory that closely related to it, and then you are looking your context, the country where do you get the data. Not all theories are applicable in every country, in every situation. So you might see 1 or 2 theories are more related based on the culture, the social, environmental factors that you have. So from there, later you will justify that from the 5 theories are related. However, you have chosen these 2 theories because of these following reasons. That's why you have to justify it. And that's why you are synthesizing it. You are describing 5, but later you are highlighting the 2 or 1 that you feel are underpinning the identified variables of your research.
Thank you. Clear. Thank you,
All right,
Charles.
let me take there some questions from online participants. Can I get chapter 1 in YouTube link? It's a very simple thing, you just go to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel name is what? Platform for Research and Development. And the latest variable is chapter 1. You just go there, you will get it. I cannot go and copy. Brother Shahrul, do you mind copying the link of chapter 1 and then giving it in the chat box if you can? Or any one of you, if you don't mind?
Okay.
Giving the link of chapter 1 in the chat box. Okay. Iskandar Francis, somebody will help you. Follow in the chat box, so we will post the link for you. Okay. Okay. This is another question. Brother Saidu. Okay. How can novice researchers identify good journals or research work while searching for articles on Google Scholar and ResearchGate? If you identify a paper, of course, in the citation, the journal name is there. Easiest way is you just go to Google. In fact, just Google search, type the journal name, and beside impact factor. If you put that in, then Shimago will basically tell you exactly whether it's Scopus index or not. And if it's Scopus index, whether it's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, it is there. Okay. The journal selection or journal identifier for Scopus, Web of Science, for all this group of journals, they have journal identifiers available there. I have one video available in my YouTube channel, Quick Journal Selection. Towards the end of this video, we have described that. Find out those way, very, very simple. You just write the journal name there and it will tell you exactly what kind of journal it is. Okay. Quick Journal Selection. I have that video in my YouTube channel. Okay. Follow that one. Brother Usman Jibir. How to use moderator in the literature review. You see, the moderating variable, we introduce when we see that relationship between independent and dependent somehow are not very established, somehow inconsistent findings are being recorded based on Barron and Kenny. And that's why we introduce a moderating variable. And that moderating variable either enhances the impact of independent to dependent, or may even decrease the impact of independent to dependent. That's the reason we introduce as moderating. So when you introduce moderating, definitely a lot of literatures are there. Possibly everybody use as independent, but in your case, you're introducing as moderating because it has inconsistent findings. Okay, so look at the literature, read Barron and Kenny. Everyone who does PhD research, this is a must-read paper. Barron and Kenny, Barron and Kenny's paper is a groundbreaking paper on moderating, mediating. You must be reading that paper. Okay. Honey Young, okay. What must conceptual framework comes? Where must conceptual framework comes? Conceptual framework is developed based on concept. Those of you who have attended my webinar on theoretical framework, developing theoretical framework, there I have mentioned there are some certain building blocks of theories. Your theory start with ideas, right? The ideas may not be relevant, may not be measurable, all that. So when idea become visible, identifiable, understandable, it become a concept. And when the concept is measurable, it become constructs. And when you develop relationship between construct, it become a theory. So you have to understand that. So when you have ideas and then you develop concept, it's not a construct yet. And construct relationship between construct and adverb tested, the theory has not been developed. It's just a concept, cannot be measured yet, If the concept can be measured, it becomes construct. So that is what it is. So in the second stage of a theory, from ideas, you make something meaningful, something understandable, something visible, that become concept. From there, you develop conceptual theory. Okay, it's like every concept become your variable. So the main research problem become your dependent variable there, and other concept that support these or contribute to the main concept become independent variable. Those are concepts, are not construct yet. Okay, so that's where the conceptual framework will come in. Okay, this is what some professor some university hypothesis in chapter 1. That one I strongly disagree. I strongly disagree with that. Hypothesis is developed or constructed based on your theoretical framework. If you have not done a literature review, then you haven't extracted the variable yet. So even if you have not extracted the variable, you haven't developed your theoretical framework yet. So how can you construct hypothesis? I personally do not, suggest or support of having hypothesis in chapter 1. Okay. All right. It's a long question. Okay, debate. How to make debate in literature review, how to defend my own country selected for research, and how and what to talk about morality media. I think I have answered all three. Debating on the literature review, basically you are agreeing or you are not agreeing with the findings that you have, because every research will have some kind of limitations and shortcomings. And from there you click on, you say that research suffers from methodological problem. There are some methodological issue there. That research did not have adequate theoretical support. That research did not select the variable based on the previous research. Justification was not enough for selecting variable. That is the debate you have, okay? And why choose your country? Definitely your country is different from mine. In terms of culture, you are different. In terms of social perspective, you are different. In terms of economic perspective, you are different. In terms of political atmosphere, you are different. In terms of gender compositions and all that, you are different. So you have to highlight and relate something very special. The policies, procedures from one country to another differs. All right. The way we talk, the way we argue, the way we discuss, elaborate things are even different from country to country. So that's what you have to pick up and tell what is so different in your country. That makes it special for you to select your country to do your research. So that's what I said during my presentation. I'm from that country, so it's easy for me to collect the data. That's why I selected my country. That is not a good argument. All right. For example, like my PhD thesis, my data come from Bangladesh because I'm from Bangladesh, right? So my sample was stock market. My study was on stock market. So in Bangladesh, it's a small economy, but we have 2 stock exchanges. Very surprising, right? 2 stock exchanges. Big country, large economy, only one. Tokyo exchange, the stock exchange. In Japan, only one. But in Bangladesh, you have 2. So that's what I said. There's something very special in my country. And that's why I've chosen this country for research premise. Okay. So definitely there's some procedures. Some policies are different from other countries. Economically, socially, politically, culturally, you are different from others. Connecting those things and say, that's why I've chosen this country and this industry for my research premise. Okay. And when you're talking moderating, mediating, you have to read Barron and Kenny. Read Barron and Kenny, understand it very well. You have to give the evidence of previous researches that, somehow you have to portray that if it is moderating, the relationship between independent and dependent are not established yet. Inconsistent findings are there. If it's mediating, then the relationship between independent and dependent are established. Established. Independent and dependent. And then you introduce a moderating, going to dependent variable. So you have to read Barron and Kenny. Then you should be able to answer that well. Okay.
Solid, Prof.
How to identify a good journal? I think I have already mentioned it. I have a video in my YouTube channel, quick journal selection. Listen to that video towards the end. the speaker have shown how to identify good journal. Okay, go through that.
Sorry, Prof.
Yeah.
Prof?
Just give me a minute. Let me answer them first, then I come back to you. Okay. Online, there are many questions there. Let me answer that. Then I'll come back to you. Can you have some one theoretical framework, conceptual framework from Reno Journal? I think if you identify any papers, good papers, either theoretical framework, conceptual framework is already there. Wait for my next session. My next session would be on theoretical framework and research methodology soon, within 4 or 5 days. Attend that session. I'm going to give you example of theoretical framework and conceptual framework. So until then, you wait. Hopefully see you in 3 or 4 days on describing on the chapter 3. Okay. Okay, how to mention I'll be talking about theoretical framework. I think I'll be doing it later. Okay, next question. What is the number of underpinning theory? There's no number limit there, but preferably you may have just 1 or 2. Sometime, if you are proposing an integrated framework, you may have 3, 4. So in your study is so complex, 1 theory or 2 theory even not enough to cover the comprehensive study. In that case, you may have 3. Most of the cases you have 1 or 2, all right? But some cases you may have 3. Okay, what is the difference between factors and variables? They are the same. Factors contribute to the dependent variable. All issues contribute to dependent variables. So factors and variables are the same, not really different. Okay. What is there is a percentage of your citation. I think I mentioned it. I said your 40% literature should be from latest 5 years. I mentioned that. Okay. How many citations should you be having in a PhD thesis? The minimum is 200. Minimum is 200. 200 citation, but you may not be reading all the papers by heart, but at least 40 research paper, key papers should be read by heart. You know everything there in the 4 key studies. That is essential for you to be strong, and you will stand strong when it goes to final viva voce and proposal differentiation. Okay. Okay. My study use social exchange theory. Okay. So should I refer to original scholar who developed this theory? Definitely. If you are using social exchange theory, you have to mention first of all who proposed this theory at the beginning, right? The first ground-making paper that proposes this theory, and after that you follow chronologically. Okay, that's what you are going to do in a thematic way under the dependent variable discussion. Those not involved in conversation, please. Okay, I think the microphone was off. I think there were some problems, possibly. I'm not very sure. Brother Mustak. Okay. Literature should be based on previous literature, logic, argument, theory, combination of all. Yes. When you say previous literature, it includes theory, it includes argument, it includes logic. all 4 are there. So it has to be a combination of it. Okay. So when you are doing literature review, you are taking things from previous researches, and all previous research are based on literature, based on logic, based on argument, based on theory. So it has to be combination of it. That makes it like critical literature review, logical sequence and good flow. All right, good flow and logical sequence only come when you combine these 4. What is the difference between research question and research hypothesis? In most of the time, research question will be converted into research hypothesis. Okay, most of the time. But again, you may have a research question that have 4 or 5 variables in one research question. In that case, you may have 4 or 5 hypotheses. Okay, so questions are answered by hypothesis. When you have constructed the research question, chapter 1, converted from research problem, at the end of the thesis, the reader will look for answers. So how do you arrive at answers? By testing hypothesis. So research question should be converted into hypothesis. These are directly related. Okay. Should it be DV always discussed first? It can be IV. No, it should be DV first, because that is your research problem. That is the phenomena being identified. That is the reason you are doing research. All right. And I give always the same example in every webinar. When you are sick, you go to see the doctor. Why? You don't feel well. That's why. You don't talk about runny nose and all that. If runny nose are there, doesn't disturb you, you won't go and see the doctor. Because we say runny nose basically what? If you go to doctor, it takes 7 days. If you don't go to doctor, it takes 1 week. That's what he said, right? You see doctor, it takes 7 days. You don't see doctor, it takes 1 week to recover. That's what he said. So if you are having a runny nose, or bit of body ache and all that, if it doesn't really give you trouble, you won't go see a doctor. You will only go and see the doctor when it becomes troublesome and it really troubles you. So that is the main problem, research problem. That has to be highlighted. When you go and see the doctor, doctor asks you, hey, why do you come to see me? Last week you see me all the time. No, you saw me. No, I'm having problem. I'm not feeling well. What is wrong? Then you started saying this happened. I'm not feeling well because I got fever, I got runny nose, I got stomachache and all that. So the first one is you are not feeling well. That has to be discussed first. That is a dependent variable. That is a research problem. That definitely got to be number one first. Okay. Research gap should be mentioned in the problem statement literature review chapter. Yes, it has to be in both chapter. You are very right. And that's the reason I always tell students, write chapter 2 first. You have not done the literature review, so how can you write research problem? Of course, you have in mind what kind of research problem you are going to undertake in research. But to fine tune, and finally define the research problem, you have to review the literature. So write chapter 2 first, then write the literature gap there, and then bring it to the research problem. Because in the research problem, you have to have main problem and all the issues. All issues are independent variables. So research gap has to be highlighted in the research problem. Only difference is, in the literature review chapter, the literature gap is research gap. That's how we put it. But research problem is not only literature gap and then the industrial problem, the gap there in the industry. Both has to be combined. That's what you call research gap, okay? I think this one I have answered. Basically both the same, underpinning theory and supporting theory. Underpinning theory is the theory that support the variable being extracted. If you have taken variables from a theory, that is underpinning theory. Sometimes you may have a theory that support your framework, but you have not taken any variables. So you say that is your supporting theory, no problem with that. So please understand what is underpinning theory. Underpinning theory is the theory that identifies variable for your framework. Supporting theory, possibly a theory that support your framework, but you did not really take any variables from that specific theory. So it still become a supporting theory, okay? All right. What is the strategy to find most recent sources? I think you go through the quick journal selection, the video available in my YouTube channel, and you will get that. Should you cite the original article or the paper we are doing? Definitely. It's better always to cite original, and then after that you are going for chronological. That's where you are going for later, study is conducted. We see sometime, and we some examiners especially will scold the student for doing it. You take from a paper who is being cited. Say, for example, somebody cited my paper. You did not read my paper, that is original. You cite me from that paper, that is wrong. If you are citing me, you have to cite from my paper. That's what it is, okay? So you have to cite from original paper, and then you are going for chronological. After that, what has been done and all that. I think that has to be understood, okay? Normally, theoretical review is stated before the empirical review. Yes, that's what I said, right? I said you start with thematic. When you go for thematic, you are going dependent variable. That's why you are going to explain the theory. And after that, you go for literature, independent and dependent, independent, dependent. Okay, so you are definitely right. Okay, so it has to go with, you are going to dependent variable, that is thematic. And while you're talking about thematic one, that is dependent variable, that's where you describe the theories that can explain. And after that only you come out independent, dependent, independent, dependent, it follows on. Okay. What is the differentiation between qualitative, quantitative literature review? I'm not sure what do you mean. When you look at literature, some literature are based on qualitative study, some literature are based on quantitative study. I don't know whether you mean by it, but I'm not really sure what do you mean. Okay. Any life example of moderating mediating variable? Many moderating variable comes from the demographic variable like age, marital status, all that. But there are certain other variables are there. Say, for example, you are looking at, you are doing a study on customer loyalty. and then you use subqual model, and you use adopted Parasuraman study. So you have 5 independent variable and dependent variable. Say, for example, customer loyalty. And if you are looking at customer loyalty on online shopping, the main problem with online shopping is the trust. Is still trust. Trust is an issue. My family, we do buy a lot of things online. We find it cheaper and even good quality. Okay, but we have been cheated a few times. So the trust issue is already there. Once my wife and my daughter, they choose a sofa bed, and the picture is looked at sofa bed, sofa connecting with another part, right? That makes it like sofa bed. But when it delivered, the sofa is not there. Only the connecting part is there. So trust is a problem. So what you can do? Independent and dependent in between, we introduce trust as moderating variable. Okay. So again, next my next session is going to be on chapter 3, where I'll be highlighting a lot on theoretical framework, hypothesis, and research methodology. Join me. It's going to be soon, within 3 or 4 days. Okay. How to develop mediation hypothesis? I think again I'll leave it for next week, next session. Difference between similarities of qualitative, quantitative literature review, because in quantitative study is based on deductive. You have established established theories. From there you go down. But in qualitative research, you don't have established theory, so it is conceptual. It's more on conceptual. In a quantitative study, because it is deductive approach, you have a lot of theories and study being done. Literature review chapter could be longer. Later, your data analysis is shorter. Even the discussion could be shorter as compared to qualitative study. Qualitative study literature review could be shorter, but later the results and discussion chapter could be longer. All right, that's the difference between qualitative and quantitative study. That one will be next issue. We are going to be a researcher. What is the first step we need to take note? If you want to become a researcher, the first thing you should do is start to have reading habit. I always say read, and read. So identify a good area that you are interested in. Identify an area where you find you academically are suitable. Identify research area that have enough resources available. Then you start reading. That's the first thing you have to do, and then later you proceed on. Okay, I think that's what the questions I have from online. I think somebody wanted to ask a question from live session. He is not there.
Yes, Prof.
Yes, please.
I just want to ask you, how do we, together with what we have discussed, what about the issue of systematic literature review? I mean, if your supervisor asks you to do a systematic literature review.
I think in my YouTube channel, I think I have already 3 or 4 webinar videos available on systematic literature review. Okay, is there? I have even proposed a summary template. How can you summarize a research paper in one single page? A paper could be 40 pages long, but it can be summarized into one single page. It is there in my YouTube channel. You can find it, and there are 3 or 4 videos available on systematic literature review. Please listen to it. I think it would be very helpful. Okay.
Okay, Prof.
All right. Thank you. I think
I have a question.
Yes. Okay. Final question. Yes.
Yes, sir. In carrying out our literature review, how do we avoid plagiarism?
Soon I'm going to introduce a video in my YouTube channel, 7 golden rules to avoid plagiarism. The first golden rule is definitely never copy and paste. Never copy and paste. Sometimes even I do. Sometimes like what we do is when you get online sources, I do not want to copy directly. So what I do, I copy it and then paste it in the MS Word, and from there I copy and paste it. But still, the plagiarism detecting software will detect it. All right. Never copy and paste. So what can you do? You see what people have done. You take the statements and write it in your own way. And still you have to put the citation, because the original idea is from people, not from you. Okay, that's the base approach. But I'm going to have 3 videos available for you soon. One is how to avoid plagiarism. Number two, how to reduce plagiarism. And number three, how to remove plagiarism. These three videos will be soon available in my YouTube channel. I have already prepared the slides. I have to make a video of these three videos, then I'll upload in my channel. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I think last question from the live. Those of you in live, how many papers is required for a review article for publication? It depends, Brother Tanko Muhammad. In certain areas, you have a lot of papers. So if you want to publish a paper, of course, we expect more papers to be cited. Certain research area are not really researched that well, so you have limited number of papers, and it is understood by people. All right. Therefore, I cannot give you exact numbers. What could be the minimum numbers? It's very difficult. For a review article, definitely it's much lesser than an empirical article. Okay, because a review article basically you're just proposing a framework. All right, so that can be done with fewer. So I would still say, for example, if you're citing about 30 to 40, a review paper is enough. I have seen review papers being cited about 20 papers or even 15 papers only, and it's been published in good journals. So it depends on the kind of problem in hand. Okay, but if you are publishing an empirical paper, of course, you need a lot of citations. Okay, because lot of works have been done, and you have consulted even those argue those papers, developing the theoretical framework of your study, developing constructing hypotheses, constructing research questions, all that based on many papers. So you have to be cited. Okay. All right. With that, if you allow me, let me end the session today. It's been long already, 1.5 hours. I thought I would finish within 1 hour. So it was great having you with me. Don't forget, this Saturday, we are going to have second session on Smart PLS. Those of you attended the first Smart PLS session, join on this Saturday on the second session. So that will be the concluding session for Smart PLS. Those of you who did not attend the first session, the video is available in my YouTube channel. Go through it, learn it, so that this Saturday, when you have a Smart PLS session number 2, you will be able to follow the Smart PLS and you will be an expert. If you can follow these two, definitely you will be qualified to complete your PhD using PLS. Okay, so hope to see you on this Saturday, and soon on my next session on theoretical framework and research methodology in 3 or 4 or 5 days. All right, the third session that I'm going to do 5-6 sessions together. So 3 days before, I have done one session. That one basically was chapter 1. Then I'm going to do today. I have done chapter 2. So another 3-4 days, I'm going to do chapter 3, then chapter 4, then chapter 5, and then after that, we'll do one session on APA referencing style. That will be like complete for every PhD students. Okay, there is I have 100 plus videos available for you. Go through and learn whatever you are required. Okay, so with that, let me conclude the session. Thank you very much again for joining me. Those of you who have joined me, possibly you can share this video in your Facebook or any other social media, so that many other people can be benefited. Many people suffers like you and me. My time when I did PhD, I suffered a lot, and many of you are not suffering. So you are getting help from us, and share this with others so that others could be also benefited from this discussion. Okay, so stay safe, stay healthy, be good, and see you next Saturday on the Smart PLS session. All right. So assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. We appreciate you.
So I'm out of the session. Okay, so I'm closing the session. Thank you very much.